So while this is not a traditional Rotten Disparities episode, this one is something where we disagree with the scores that are written out. Welcome to the HolmFront. Okay, this is the first HolmFront episode that I think is gonna sound better than the originals.
We just talked about this.
We did, and I ignored you on purpose. It's my show.
All right, this is episode 1, apparently.
This isn't episode 1. This is just the first episode that sounds good. That's all.
That is correct. That is the truth of it. All right, what are we going to be talking about today?
We are going to be talking about two movies.
Okay.
Here's the thing. So this segment is called Rotten Disparities. By the way, I'm your host, Tyler.
That's right. We got to do that. I'm Mitch. I'm also here to
And this-
borrow a line from a friend of mine.
This is my co-host, my overly artistic friend, as we determined to call you.
Yes.
So I shortened that to OAF. I thought it was better. OAF if you
I'll
want,
take
but whatever. And to introduce properly, my name is Tyler Holm. Thus the name HolmFront. Just to give it some context, I suppose, because I had some people that were like, "I don't understand the name." Well, it's mine. It's my name. So here you are. So yeah, we're going to be talking about two movies that we both enjoy quite a bit, actually.
Yeah.
And that audiences and critics seem to be kind of hovering.
But mostly hate.
It's leaning dislike, which I thought was not deserved at all.
Agreed. Yeah, because normally in a Rotten Disparities episode, what we want to do is we look for a film where either the audiences or the critics really liked it, and then the other party did not.
Disagrees.
Yeah,
right.
they have a massive disagreement about it. But this time, the audiences and critics are both in the same camp, and they're both wrong.
Incorrect.
We're the only two that actually have it right.
I will say most people have, when I speak to people, so this is anecdotal entirely, but most people that I speak to like at least Prometheus. Covenant seems to have a little bit lesser of a rating.
That's fair. So it's the Alien movies. It's Ridley Scott's follow-up after I don't even know how many years. And of course, the Alien series is very well received with its first two entries. Then you had that weird third one, and then you had some god awful like fourth one, or fifth one. I don't even remember how many they had. I've seen them, but it's just like it's a lot of concentrated effort to block them from memory because they're so bad. And then they came out with Prometheus in 2012, and I agree with you. I think that one does go over slightly better than Alien Covenant, but the thing is, after Covenant came out, it was more like people were annoyed that Covenant was following the footsteps of Prometheus. And so I feel like Prometheus is still partly to blame, at least in people's minds. They're like, oh, this movie was, I was in the mix maybe, but like now after Covenant, now they're both just bad and I just don't want anything to do with this stuff anymore.
Yeah, this is a tough one to evaluate because, okay, so here's the thing. Initially I was thinking maybe we should go watch the first 3 Alien films and kind of get a comparison, but then I was like, no, I kind of like Prometheus standing alone without remembering everything that, came before it.
Without all that baggage.
Yeah, all that garbage. I remember the first one pretty well.
Yeah.
And then personally, not to foreshadow too much, but I don't like the second one very much at all.
Aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay.
It
has good things about it.
It's a quintessential Cameron film, and I'm not Cameron's biggest fan. Here's the thing, though, about the difference between the two, and I think this is the furthest we should go with the original, I guess, trilogy.
Yeah.
Or 4 movies. Everyone forgets. Most people forget about the third one as it is, and apparently there's a fourth one. I didn't even know that.
It's the Joss Whedon one. Oh wait, no, there's a Joss Whedon one. Oh yeah, and then there's one by some French director. who doesn't even like horror movies. And it's really funny because in an interview or something, he's like, I don't even know why they asked me. It's like, well, why did you accept that?
Why not?
It's like, I don't even know what I'm here.
It's a major franchise. You're definitely gonna get some eyes, but maybe not ones that you want.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: Alien 1, basically a perfect film.
Yeah.
It just hits
Totally.
all the marks properly, but it
Yeah,
doesn't
great
have a
film.
lot of philosophical depth. It alludes to certain things, but mostly it's just
It's
it,
just there to create mystery, that
all
stuff.
all of its elements play into the horror.
Yeah.
The second film, while I'm not its biggest fan, does expound upon elements that were there
Mm-hmm.
and make it a different film in a way that resonated with audiences pretty well. They went kind of this action route, but kept the horror elements and therefore fairly well received.
Yeah.
It's a pretty well received sequel. Then when I got to Prometheus, Ridley, being Ridley Scott, decided he wanted to expound on the philosophical elements of Alien and the things that I assume he had in mind when he created the first one.
Mm-hmm.
So it diminished the horror elements of Alien in a way that I think did not resonate with audiences
Yeah.
or critics for that matter.
Right.
And I'm a little bit surprised, so I'm going to switch over to this view. So obviously critics liked it a little bit more than the audiences.
Yeah, 73% critics,
right.
68 audience. So it's about a 5% jump, but that's not a big. It's
Right.
still not very complimentary. It's pretty.
Right.
It's harsh for, I think, an Alien movie that's directed by Ridley Scott. I think that's why it's noteworthy.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, what do you think that critics disliked about this film? Or not that they didn't like in like an active way, but what was it that did not resonate with them?
That's an interesting question. I remember seeing this movie in theaters, and I really liked it. I thought it was an alien movie, but with philosophical elements. So you had horror and philosophy, and I thought, oh, what a unique blend.
You think
to
the
put the
horror
two
crowd
together.
was just forced to think too much? Is that the problem? They're like, I don't want to evaluate this.
Well, you're supposed to evaluate the audiences.
I'm sorry.
I'll evaluate the critics. That is my guess, though, for what it's worth, of what the audience is. This is just too smart. I don't want to be thinking. And actually, now that Alien Romulus is in theaters and everybody's liking it, they're like, yeah, this is what we want. Like, we don't want that philosophical, BS. Get that crap out of here. But also, that movie's like just barely holding 80%, like just barely. Like, and I think that's my issue with it.
Wait, with the audience or the critics?
Both.
Oh, okay,
both are in
gotcha.
the same camp on that one as well, because it's like you basically limit yourself to like all you can get is your classic stereotypical alien movie, and that's fine, but it's just popcorn stuff. Like Prometheus here was reaching for something really different, and for that, I think it gets a lot of bonus points for me. I think it's interesting to see all these other elements that he goes into. So I guess in terms of like critics, this is a hard one to read. I don't know what it is that bothers them so much about this. There's like, I guess, a few sequences where some of the characters do things that are a little too brash and not really well explained. Because I mean, critics are probably going to want like a little more depth with their characters, or they're going to want like more visual nuance. And I don't think the film kind of is too interested in either of those. Like, it's a beautiful film, don't get me wrong, but it's not necessarily like, it's not like a Stanley Kubrick level of shots where you're going, whoa, what's the deep meaning in every frame? It's more like its subject matter is introducing some interesting concepts.
Which I will push back a little bit. I actually thought, because I just watched this the other day in preparation for this, I thought that the characters actually had a lot more depth than I remembered.
Okay.
I mean, it's a horror movie, so you're not gonna get like the full 3-dimensional thing. But in the route that he was going, I thought that they all filled their archetypes pretty well.
Yeah.
While still having a little bit extra. Even like Idris Elba's character, who's the pilot in this film, seemed to have, I don't know, something there. It wasn't much, but it was enough to be like a little bit more than 2-dimensional. Not quite 3-dimensional, but a little bit more. Two plus, we'll call it.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciated that, but I understand that, I don't know, you're kind of playing both worlds there, because when you have Ripley in the first one, she's just enough. You know, she's just
Well,
enough of what she needs to be. And then this one, there's not like a central character, I guess. There's one that they follow more than the others, but like they do kind of diversify a little bit.
yeah, the difference I think with that one movie is in the original Alien, it's not that the characters have more depth, it's just that they more clearly represent things that make for more interesting talking points. So for example, the captain says, "Oh, well, like he got attacked by something, so open the door and let us in." This is in the original Alien movie. And then Sigourney Weaver's character is like, "Well, he could be infected with something. We have to follow protocol." And then he's like, "Just let us in." So this is like a moral conundrum, right? It's like, what's the right thing to do? Do you follow protocol or do you ignore that because someone is in danger, right? And so they like that better
Mm.
because there's too many characters in this movie. Like I'm talking about the ancillary characters who die, who get eaten by insectoid things. The ones who are like there's that one character who's like a total idiot and he's like, "Oh, well look at this thing. I'm going to pet it. It's like hissing at you. What's wrong with you? Are you out of your mind?" Like so
That
there is
part
like
that part was insultingly stupid for sure.
yeah, and like I didn't have a problem with that because I mean it's terrifying what that thing
It
does to
is.
him. It's just like, "Oh god, I don't want to watch that." But you know, you kind of also do because it's a horror movie. That's what you signed up for. But
Yeah.
yeah, I could see where like critics being bothered by stuff like that because there's no like that's what I mean by like there's no character nuance. There's no like situational awareness. It's just like, hey, here's your horror scene, and then it kind of stops there. And the other, or actually, do you want to respond to that first, or because I've got like one more point I want to throw in on that one.
Well, the only thing I'll say there is that though that stuck out to me because there's two characters that get stuck. They get trapped in this thing and they can't
Mhm.
get out. They don't
Yeah.
leave on time or whatever.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. The guy, I think he's a geologist. The guy that maps out this place, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that gets lost. It's like, isn't he the one with all the materials to map this place out? Like, he was the one that I would least expect to get lost in here. So,
the guy with the map.
yeah,
Can't find his way out.
it was like the guy that created the map of this place is the one who gets lost, which I was like,
Yeah.
Okay, you lost me there. And then the guy who's there to I forget what exactly he is because it's real briefly mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
but he's the one that studies animals or alien or life in general, whatever it
Yeah.
is that he does. I forget. He's like zoologist or something like
Mhm.
along those lines. He's the one that gets killed by the snake thing. I'm like, why are you messing with it?
Huh.
Like, so the two contradictions there were the ones that stood out. But they were like real small nitpicks because I understand. It was like, yeah, they're sacrificed at the behest of the story, in my opinion, because it is a horror story and you got to show some of these elements of the film. But
Maybe Ridley Scott did it on purpose.
he probably did.
He was probably like, well, he's the guy with the map, so he's the one who gets lost. And he's the guy who knows how to interact with the alien animals, so he's the one who gets killed by an alien animal. And the thinking there would be like human beings like thinking they know something about the world when they don't.
Hmm.
Because that is one of the prevailing themes in this.
It
It's
is.
very nihilistic. It's partly why I liked it. I thought it was fascinating how there's all these characters who are just obsessed with like we're gonna figure out these mysteries, we're gonna get these questions,
Right.
and then they get there and it's just like this is terrible. Like,
Yeah, I will.
you wanted to know.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Which I appreciated that aspect of it, and it was more. I had forgotten that he had addressed a couple of the issues that I wanted him to address
Okay.
because he goes a little bit into the divine at first.
Yeah, there's a whole arc of talking about like
Right.
it's like atheism versus, theism or something like that.
Right. Actually, I would even argue that it's probably more along the lines of deism.
Or deism, yes. Yeah.
Um,
That's what I meant.
but yeah, like because at first I was thinking through this after I watched it, and I was like, so their basic premise was that these things created humans. I was like, but who created them? They just kind of created this endless cycle.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I don't really like the question posed. But then, as I watched it again, I realized that they actually asked the question. One of the characters was like, well, yeah, who created them?
Yeah.
And so they kind of acknowledged the circular reasoning there. And it was interesting because then they have the contrast with David, who's the cyborg created by Wayland. and he even brings it up. There was a point in there where he was saying something along the lines of, the character was saying to David, "Yeah, we made you because we could," and then
Right.
David retracts, or he rebuffs with the line like, "Could you imagine how disappointing it would be if you heard that from your creators?" And
Yeah.
then the
Yeah.
movie proceeds to tell you that that's exactly what it was,
Right. Right. Right.
essentially.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I mean, so it kind of like I can understand why, as an alien film, it doesn't seem to fit all together.
Right, because it's about this like a grander philosophical concept about like
Right.
creators and creations. And the horror of this movie is that as a creation, your creator doesn't give a crap about you. And in
In
fact,
fact, it
probably
hates
wanted to
you.
kill you.
Yeah.
And so it's very disappointed in what's happened with you, or like you're like a failed experiment to it. So
Right.
it's like, oh well, I just let me just destroy this, throw that, burn that up, throw it in the trash, and let me
Right.
start over. That's like the attitude it has. And so, Scott's trying to make that the horrifying concept, which is new and different. And I get it. It's not like quote unquote alien, but I mean, what are they supposed to do? Just go back and do like the same thing all over again? Like, you have to bring in new ideas. And I thought it was a perfectly sensible idea, especially because you already had the androids in the original film.
Right.
And so
Yeah, it was
that concept already existed in the series.
as a story, it's a natural progression. But as a alien movie, it I can see how it can be disappointing to someone thinking that they're going to get an alien movie, right? Cuz
So this, you're speaking for the audiences now, right? This is what you think they
I'm
don't.
trying. Cuz here's the thing again is that I appreciate this movie and I disagree with the score that was given, but I understand also when I've seen Alien and Aliens,
Hmm.
when you come to this film, it's so different and it's a lot. I wouldn't say it's lower paced because Ridley always has slow paced films.
Yeah.
Specifically, Alien, I think it takes its time to really establish and then lead in. But I
And
love
Blade
his.
Runner.
Well, that one never picks up. Is the problem. The thing I loved about Alien, though, the first film, was
Mhm.
that he does a great job of slow build up because he does this like incline, like getting on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
But then when it crests that thing, it goes down the whole rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And he does the same thing in Prometheus, which I really loved, because it does do a real slow build, and
Mhm.
then things just start going wrong one after the other, and then it just goes that way until the end of the movie. Um, but the thing about it is, like, you don't encounter an actual xenomorph in the film until the very, very end.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a post-credit scene. So I get why. It's more about like, I don't know. It's more dealing with face huggers before the face huggers.
Yeah, it's very primordial, and I will say that is one thing I don't think they should have maybe done, because Prometheus is this weird movie where they try to separate themselves from Alien, but they want it to also be an Alien movie. And that I think was the wrong call. I think they needed to commit to one or the other. It needs to either be an Alien movie or not. Make up your mind.
Get
Because the
into the
fact that
mic.
what?
Get into the mic a little bit.
Oh, yeah. It either needs to be an alien movie or not, because they need to just make up their mind. I don't think it works to say, to call it Prometheus, not have the alien title, and then not show it at all the whole movie, but then show it at the very, very end in the end credit scene. Here's the alien. It's like that's just as like a tease. So
Right.
I can definitely see people being frustrated with that. That makes total sense. And like if they had put alien in the title, Alien Prometheus, then people will be wondering, where the hell is the xenomorph the whole movie? When is it going to show up? And
Right.
so I get like, but that's also like like so I'll be honest, I don't care to see the xenomorph in alien movies. It doesn't matter. It was in the first one. That's all I needed it to be. The whole idea of the xenomorph was that it was this monstrosity that was unpredictable. So every time you see it in that film, it's like in a completely different form. When you first see it, it's the face hugger thing, and then it's like the baby thing that bursts out of the chest, and then it's like a little bit older, and then it's like it's in shadows, and like eventually you see its final form, but it takes a long time to get to that point. So like as the characters are trying to adapt, they don't know what they're confronting because it's something that changes all the time. And that's part of the horror, is that it's unpredictable, right? I mean, I think The Thing is actually one of those movies that does similarly, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
It's a good horror way to build horror because it's terrifying if you can't define definitively what you're fighting. And so, like, in this movie, I think they just need to do something like that, like make a new alien concept or aliens that they encounter and develop these ideas and how it like grows and evolves and does different things. I think that's what I would have done, and I'm sure Alien fans would have hated that because they wouldn't have gotten their xenomorph. But it's like, just go watch the original Alien then. Like, you've already got it, or go watch Aliens. That's a whole fest where they burn a bunch of aliens and shoot them and with guns.
I like the miming. Appreciate it. I didn't know what it was until you
yeah,
the flamethrowers. Got it. Yeah, I think so. That would be where the disparity would come, I think, between critics and audiences, because it is the Alien franchise and the alien is the xenomorph, which means, it's false advertising if you don't get it, especially if it shows at the end that acknowledges almost like, hey, yeah, this could have been in the movie, but this is what you get.
Yeah.
It's at the end now. It's over.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I understand why it got the rating it did. I disagree with it. I really enjoyed this movie, despite the fact that it's in the Alien universe. I like the fact that he addresses the questions that he raises in the first one, because I find them interesting. I like
the space jockey stuff.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I thought they were really good answers to all those questions.
Yeah,
and I think it's interesting because this film, you use the term nihilistic. You could even use the term subversive. It is, something that goes against what your expectations may be of what these answers are. Because, you go up and you're like, well, what happens when you do meet your maker? The questions that you want to ask, they do ask them, and they hate the answers. But at the same time, he did set it up, especially with David,
yeah.
Why did you make me? Well, because I could. And then I could destroy you just as easily. And they answer those questions very similarly. And I think it's interesting to think of it that way, even though it doesn't address. It's almost like a lazy way out on a writer's level, because he's like, well, I don't know how to answer these questions because they're questions that I have, but I can answer them in a way that would fit a horror movie.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, that's not really, I don't know that philosophers should always be expected to have the answers. They're just there to try to ask the right questions. And especially, I think this is even more important when you're in art. As a philosopher, maybe you are going to interrogate that a little more, but as an artist, I do think that by and large, you're going to be just kind of presenting arguments and try to pull out the nuance for us. But this is for if you're going to think, and we don't want to think.
No,
we want to see people die.
Kill them all, dismemberment, and
aliens.
Exactly. Which, I mean, you do get quite a bit of in this film. I mean,
yeah, I think so.
On the horror elements, I think they did a really good job, and there's some rough moments, I will say.
And that's the part that I don't understand with people when they're like, they give it such a low score, and I'm like, especially like audiences. So maybe you can explain this one to me. Audiences are going out to see this movie. It's a horror movie, so they just want to be scared. They just want to be terrified. They want to see people die by aliens and gruesome deaths. You get that in this movie. You get it in large quantities. So is it fair for the audiences to give it such a low score when, I mean, you get what you pay for, right?
I refer back to my original point that it's less about the xenomorphs and the facehuggers, and you have.
It's not enough.
No,
not enough of this score.
More blood. I think what happened is that he got a little too diverse in styles, and I will. Okay, so that was actually a final critique of mine. There was that scene. He didn't set up the world appropriately, I think, on an audience critique level. There's the scene where the guy who dies by the acid on the face or whatever.
Oh yeah.
He crawls back to the ship and he's like this zombie thing. Now, just stand alone.
Yeah.
Scene's great. Right?
Yeah, it's great.
It's like, what more could you ask for? This is fantastic. You can't kill him. You have to burn him to death and all that kind of stuff. But I was like,
back to the flamethrowers I mentioned.
Exactly. But there was nothing else that happened in that movie that was anything similar to that. And there was no logical reasoning to help us understand why that happened. It almost was like, wouldn't it be scary if this happened? And then they just put it in the movie.
Yeah, I think that was kind of like them trying to do the thing in Alien where the monster is different every time you encounter it.
Yeah.
But you're right, it doesn't really.
It doesn't make
We're
any
not really
sense.
matching it. They have this black icky goo stuff,
Right.
that like you touch it and then bad things happen,
Right.
and that's like all you get. So it's a little. It feels really weak.
Well, it's not consistent. That was the point. Was that
Yeah, what it does is super erratic. It's totally
Right.
different every time it interacts with someone. So
Which,
yeah, I agree. That's kind of a problem.
as a concept, is fine. It just that was such a drastic difference.
Mhm.
You know, a zombie person as opposed to the snake thing, because that was the thing, is that the snake that like kills that one guy, and then
Yeah.
its blood is acidic, kind of like the xenomorphs, and that's what kills him. It just like melts his face off or whatever, and like, oh, that's fine. But then he comes back to life somehow. When
Well, I assume he falls over and then the black icky goo like pours into his face or
yeah,
something.
but
But it's like
it doesn't show that. So
right,
like to make
yeah.
that reach, like I didn't make that reach. I just knew that he was affected by this goo stuff, this
Yeah.
poison, acid, whatever. So you had that, and then you had the snake thing, which doesn't appear ever again. It kind of like it like jumps into the guy's throat or whatever and kills him from the inside. Or
Yeah.
like I get it, horrifying elements of the film, but
Uh-huh.
what does that do? It's just there. It's just like, this is just part of this world, I guess. It's just a snake that lives on this planet, and
Yeah.
then its poison can make someone come back to life and go attack its fellow friends. That's the thing. Like, it didn't make a whole lot of sense, right? The first film, the facehuggers create the aliens, the xenomorphs, through the people, and then that comes after them. Like, it's a very logical step through a process that pushes the narrative forward and also like keeps us engaged. This one was too erratic, and so you're trying to grasp something as you go. The one thing that was consistent was, well, now, okay, so there's the third one is within this topic, is that David goes and spikes the guy's drink.
Oh, it's spiked, all right.
Right. And it kills him, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it does to him, it affects him. But before that, he impregnates his wife.
Yeah.
Who then gives birth to this monster. I was like, okay, so she gives birth, but he dies. But she gives birth to something who can also give birth to something else. And it's just like,
right.
it's just all over the
with
place.
Your DNA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is fine. Like, I would have understood more if he came back as a zombie. Like, if they swapped it. So the one guy dies, and then he comes back as the zombie. But I understand they like burn him to death. That's the way they handle it.
Mm-hmm. That is a very valid point.
Right.
Because it creates an inconsistency. I think conceptually it's very watery what this black icky goo stuff is supposed to do. It doesn't feel like it's well thought out at all. And
which is fine. Don't get me wrong. That's fine.
Yeah, but I'm counterasking that. I'm saying it's not fine. I'm saying it now creates this problem for them. It's like you made something that's too abstract to exist. Like nothing would ever really exist in that capacity.
Right.
It doesn't really make sense. So like just the kind of the foundation of it is very almost like dreamlike. Like in a dream, it might do different things like that and be super erratic, but not in real life. So yeah, it's just not a very relatable thing. I also think I'm glad you mentioned the whole like birthing sequence because, you know, Ridley Scott's gone on record, I believe, saying that like part of like the concept for the original Alien was like it's essentially like rape. It's like men getting raped basically because he's like, well, men can't really experience rape, not in the same way. So he was like, what, or at least birthing, right? So he like creates this like horrific like birthing sequence for like men to experience. That was at least like part of the inspiration, right? I bring that up.
Him and Geiger, man. Jeez,
I know, right?
Yes, go see a therapist. Gosh.
Okay, so I bring that up simply because in this movie, it kind of like goes back against that a little bit because Shaw is now the one who has to get this like baby out of her stuff. You know what I mean? It's kind of like now it's just attacking women, so it kind of just feels like, that like loses kind of the charm of what the other one was doing on some level.
The charm.
Because the thing is, Sigourney Weaver is the character who survives.
Right.
She's the one who makes it out. And so she's the one who's resilient. She's the one who can handle childbirth. All the men, they just die. I'm going to keep talking while you're
That's
laughing
good.
about that.
That was good. I was not expecting that at all.
Yeah, some trivia for you.
Man.
Okay, but I will say that sequence, though, I mean, all the kind of maybe subliminal messaging aside, that sequence I still think is very well directed. It's a terrifying sequence where she's like having to give herself like this
Oh my
C-section.
gosh.
It's just like,
I can
like
barely watch it. It's hard.
it's so
I'm
hard to
like,
get through that sequence.
because it's so visceral.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So that's one of the greatest, not the greatest thing about, but this is an extremely strong part of this movie is that it
Yeah.
looks incredible
Yeah.
from start to
Like I
finish.
said, I wasn't kidding. It's a beautiful film.
It
The
is gorgeous.
cinematography is just immaculate.
Including the gore. It is
And the gore.
incredible. Because
Yeah.
I mean, cuts its stomach open and it holds it open, pulls the thing out, and you see all of it. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
it is rough.
And Scott's direction to like of what you see when and like his like the map of escalation in this movie when it skyrockets
Immaculate.
is excellently done. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really well put together. But like with a lot of Scott movies, if the script isn't good, he ain't gonna fix it.
That's true.
He doesn't
Yeah.
really bother with the script. He's just like,
It's
good
like,
enough
all
for
right,
me.
I can do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which. Well, okay. So should we lead this into Covenant then?
Yeah.
'Cause those are-
With one other point I want to make.
Okay.
Do you want me to do that now, or
Yeah,
were you
please
gonna...
do.
Okay. Okay. So the other thing I was gonna say as potentially a reason why people didn't like it is there is a conspiracy theory that Charlize Theron's character is an android, right?
Oh.
You remember these, right?
I think I heard that once. I
Yeah.
totally forgot about that theory.
Right. So the theory is interesting to think about. It's just that when you're relying on a conspiracy theory to like propel the intrigue of your narrative, you've done screwed up because most people don't want to do that. So what I'm saying is they do actually leave some hints to suggest it, and it is weird and unusual, but it doesn't feel like there's enough intentionality there for us to really engage with it. And so what happens is it gets relegated to a conspiracy theory and then just gets completely forgotten about.
How does that fix the film, though?
I don't know that it, well, basically
How
it's,
does it strengthen the film?
well, you would commit to an idea, an actual comment. And I guess
Okay.
we now, I guess you could argue we know that this isn't going to work because of how the sequel film Alien Covenant turns out, because it does lean more on this idea. If anything, I think it strengthens the conspiracy theory argument because androids play a much more important role in Covenant, I think, because David becomes like the main character that you follow, or he's the
Right.
through line character. So we're literally following an android character. So yeah, that was just the other thing I thought worth mentioning in terms of like if you want your story to resonate with people, don't make it a conspiracy theory. The only thing that's gotten away with that is a video game called Off, which is just a conspiracy theory incarnate. That's the only thing I can think of that warrants it, because nothing in that game makes any sense. So there's that. But everything else, don't rely on conspiracy theory.
Okay. So here's the thing. Just to address that one, I guess.
Sure.
I don't think that is particularly. I don't know. So yeah, it's a conspiracy theory. So I don't like that. But also,
But yeah, it just doesn't have a lot of evidence to support it in the film. So
Right.
then you don't feel comfortable making an argument of like, oh, this is a good resolution, because it's like, well, is that even a reasonable thing that I'm seeing here, or is this just me projecting? That's what the headspace it puts you in, and I think that doesn't work.
but they address it in the movie too. I think is the point. Because Idris Elba goes up and he's like, "Hey, are you a robot?"
Yeah.
And then he goes and like sleeps with her, I guess.
Well, that's the implication. You don't see anything. And I'm
True.
not saying we needed to see that scene, but it's just like a weird sequence because you have this interaction. You go, why is this scene here? What is it for? Right?
Right, but wouldn't he have mentioned it in some capacity? Like, because he goes and dies and he saves her. He like jettisons her out, which would imply to me that she is human, or that he would have mentioned like, "You care to live?" I don't know. Seems kind of weak, but whatever. I guess. Let's use that to jump into
Alien Covenant.
Alien Covenant.
So what's the review score for this one?
That
It's
is
even
a
worse, isn't it?
fantastic question. It's
Oof.
it is worse.
65 to 55.
Yep.
Not great.
Yeah. Well,
Who wants to go first?
yeah, I was gonna ask you, what do you think they liked about this one? Critics.
What's that? Why does it have a 10% greater margin?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. The only thing I can think of is that, and this is true of Prometheus, is that the filmmaking is good. Like, these
Yeah.
are visually beautiful films to watch.
Yeah.
And that's not something I would even say about the original. I mean, the original is a great film, but it's not like a stimulating visual masterpiece for me. And I guess you could argue it is. But like I'm a big like color person, for example, and these two films have like really specifically distinct color palettes. And I guess it's like a small thing, but it just really adds a lot to it. Such a lame reason, I know. But like, if you're just looking at like other horror films, like put it in perspective like this. Horror films are typically very cheap movies to make, and they get a sizable return back. And so Hollywood produces them just like whatever. Like if you want to get into movie making, just make some low budget horror movie because like that's a really low stakes project to sign off on. It doesn't have a high bar to reach, and you can generally pull off and get an audience pretty easily. So the thing with these movies though is that they're not low budget horror movies. They actually like pretty fancy sci-fi movies. And so for me, that adds a lot to the appeal. It's kind of like premium horror, you know? And so I like the cinematography. I like the kind of, careful eye that Scott has throughout these movies. And perhaps like some critics feel like, well, it's Ridley Scott. He's a good director. There is some good merits into the film. So it's not the worst thing I ever saw. Right. And they kind of lean on that as opposed to just because they have no problems criticizing your generic B horror movie. They're just like, yeah, it's trash. It's a B horror movie. You get what you pay for. And then calling it a day.
Okay. I like how we're struggling with this one.
I mean,
So
it's hard. It's hard to know,
it
like,
is.
because it's not just a bomb, right? This is 65%. So some of them liked it. Some of them felt like there's some merits here.
Yeah, still leaning towards the negative, but it's still in the positive. It's
Yeah.
D or whatever that is. As for audiences,
Yeah, tell me about that. They got their xenomorph. Can't complain about that.
yeah. So here's what I think happened with this one specifically is that yes, you did get, and you got a bunch of xenomorphs actually. You got a bunch of various types.
Yeah.
However, they were not the subject of the film. They were not. So you have the first
Yeah.
movie, which is Ripley versus Xenomorph, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the crew, but eventually just for her. This one, it's not the primary antagonist, nor does it have a will of its own, and I think that's probably why. Because you have the wild ones that are kind of just out there attacking people, but then you have a lot of themes where the android is trying to develop a relationship with them and create. It's almost like he's stepping into the role of a father for these things.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's like he's expounding on the themes that he set up in Prometheus, where he's asking questions about creation, and then I think he's applying that to whether he can create something himself. And so he's like messing with science, and that is brought forth in what the relationship he develops with Shaw, and then how he uses her. And that's like it's one connecting factor besides the fact that David is in this movie to Prometheus. So I thought it expounded on a lot of those philosophical concepts. It starts the movie with a scene between him and Wayland.
Yeah.
Where he's asking about that stuff about creation, who created Wayland, and then, his creation himself. And then it goes into the continuation of Prometheus, which I thought a lot of it was very interesting. I really liked David as an antagonist.
He's great. And Fassbender was an excellent casting choice.
Yeah.
He was perfect.
Yep. Yeah, so all that stuff I really loved. I loved how it expounded upon Prometheus. So I thought the movie suffered a little bit in my eyes because it seemed like he was trying to cater a little bit too much. I think he saw the reception of Prometheus and was like, all right, I got to lean further into the alien concept in order to keep my audience. And so it was trying to balance too precariously, and I think it tipped both ways on certain points of the movie too far. And
Mm-hmm.
so that really bled through. I think that's one of the reasons why the score was a little bit low, because it wasn't as pointed
Yeah.
as Prometheus. Because Prometheus is really tight. It's very like it just runs straight to that finish line, and it does a
Yeah.
really good job of doing that without like adding too much fat. It does have those elements that I was talking about that are kind of illogical, but at the same time, the story itself, as the driving factor, does really a really great job of telling it. The film does.
Mm-hmm.
This one, for what it is, does also do a really great job of telling its story, but also tries a little too hard to cater to Alien fans, traditional Alien fans, I should say, while also trying to keep the Prometheus fans.
What do you mean by catering? Like, what does it do that's a cater?
So, like we were saying, the first one doesn't have any xenomorphs. This one's got a lot, and then it's got these weird elements of. So we were talking about how it's kind of chaotic and unpredictable in the first one. This one adds an element of David manipulating reality in order to create certain circumstances, and so it's almost like he's dictating the horror, which is
Oh,
fine,
okay.
from
Yeah.
us. Like we like
Yeah.
that aspect of it, but you have elements where it's just not. It deviates too far, right? Alien is no longer this like force of its own.
It doesn't. It's yeah. So okay. So like, it's almost does a sleight of hand instead of this being the subject matter of where it comes from. It's this other thing. And
Right.
we don't want this other thing, and that's what they're having trouble with.
Which I
Okay.
liked.
Yeah, I like that too. I mean, I thought it was interesting that he's
Yeah.
harnessing them because essentially, like, they brought this upon themselves.
Right.
And he's a fascinating character. He's like, he's weird. He's like total narcissism, right? He's
You're
going,
talking about David?
yeah,
Yeah.
and they're bringing in. This is coming from like, you know, I don't want to say. I mean, I guess Greek mythology to an extent. They mentioned Prometheus,
Right.
and the other one, and then this one now is sort of like, I forget his name, but it's like the narcissist guy who just like stares at himself in the mirror, and so, they're pulling on some
Narcissus.
Narcissus, yeah, something like that. So yeah, maybe that's what they're going with, but like, who wants that? Just alien kill people.
And they expound a little bit more on that too, because obviously spoilers. This one, he comes into the planet of whatever it is that they're called. They name them. I can't remember.
Name what? The
The
xenomorphs?
the creators, the ones that created humans, whatever they are. Anyway, the
I don't
alien
remember.
race, he comes in and wipes them out. So he like
Yeah,
kills humans gods, right?
yeah.
And so
I mean, that's a great scene. He
it
just
it
like
is.
obliterates them because he doesn't care.
Well, he
And
uses their own
he's
weapon against them too. He's like, the
yeah,
thing that you use to kill your own creation is going to be used to wipe you all out.
yeah,
And that scene is really interesting, and it sets up a theme of the film as well,
uh-huh,
where David realizes that he can take that power
yeah. He can play
away.
God.
Right.
Yeah.
He becomes God essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's trying to find a way to play God like they have, and he's like, "Well,
Right.
I could kill all of you. Wouldn't that count?"
Yeah.
And
Let's
then
just start.
let's try it
Yeah.
and see if that makes me feel that way.
Right. And then he expounds on the themes of the previous film by
Yeah.
exercising these elements on Shaw and creating the xenomorphs
Which is interesting because you don't see any of that stuff take
Right.
place.
through the aftermath.
Yeah, and you're like, "Whoa, what happened here? This is effed up."
It's dark.
Yeah.
Um,
But that's like a weird moment of subtlety because this movie has a lot of moments that are super B. And it's very strange that he leaned on that because that's not really true of Prometheus. That's partly why I kind of like Prometheus a little bit more. Because in this one, there's like the whole shower scene where they're like taking a shower and like making out. And then like the xenomorph comes up and like kills him. It's like, what is this? And there's like a couple
so
other scenes.
that's one of those moments I was talking about where it caters too hard.
Yeah, okay.
Because he's like,
yeah.
this is a traditional alien horror scene where they're like, they think they're they're like free of the horror, and then all of a sudden they're not. It's like, all right. And that's
Yeah.
the thing about it is I actually like the real ending of the film a lot better, because that actually made sense in a logical sense of how that story had been progressing,
What do you mean the real ending?
the way that the movie actually ends.
Okay.
So if you haven't seen the movie, there's two androids, David and the other one's name. They're both played by Michael Fassbender,
Yeah.
and they get into a fight at
It's
the
like
end. You don't
William
know
or
which one
something.
wins, but you also don't know what winning means.
Yeah.
It happens off screen. when they get on the ship, everyone goes back into cryosleep, and he goes up to the main character, and she realizes that it's no longer the android that she
Yeah.
knew, it's David. And then she falls
Uh-huh.
asleep. And so that's supposed to lead into the next, or that never happened.
Yeah.
That to me was a real horrifying element because you never know what he's going to do. It seems like because he brings on the black goo, and it's like he's
Yeah.
got a plethora of people that he can create all these xenomorphs with if he wants to, essentially. He can
Yeah.
create all this life. And so that element's really good, but he also throws in that element of Alien 1, the alien's still on the ship, right? That's the shower
Okay.
scene that they have, because
Yeah.
they go through the whole thing of killing this alien off and like
Uh-huh.
jettisoning it into space or whatever,
Right.
and then they end it with David's ending. So again, like I said, it seems to try to cater too much to both sides,
Okay.
and that like really exemplified it at the end, and that's why it
Yeah.
felt so B horror, because it was like, this
Yeah.
isn't what this film's about. He's just throwing it in here because they're here for Alien movie.
Yeah, well, it's the classic bait and switch too. The way he handles that, I think, is kind of weak because they're fighting, and then one of them gets away, and it's, ooh, which one is it going to be? And you're like,
Right.
come on, man.
Yeah, we
Like,
all know.
we all know where this is going. Like, where else could it go? So
Right.
it just kind of is kind of a cheap way.
Right.
Like, I like the result that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That is really interesting, but it's like I have to kind of almost overlook certain elements.
Overlook the fact that you saw it coming.
Yeah. Overlook the fact that
I saw this a half hour ago, dude.
Yeah, and you're like, ooh, you don't know.
That is one element of like when the alien is on the ship.
Uh-huh.
That is one thing that it does, is that it distracts you from the fact that you knew that it was David that got on.
Yeah.
So it kind of like pushes you away from that, but you still remember because he's part of the whole element. And like the things that he does, he's like Overwatch or something. He's watching the cameras and leading them through the hallways. So he's really trying to lean into like, oh, well, he's helping them. He's saving them. So it must not be David, right? But then at the end, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it was David the whole time.
Yeah, so that part's pretty lame. I also think, too, that, people complain that the characters are stupid in Prometheus. They're stupider in this movie.
Oh, hardcore.
Like, there's so many characters that just do really dumb things. And I don't know, it feels like, because like in Prometheus, the characters have less time to do something about their situation. Like, I get it, the guy's an idiot and a moron for being like, oh, like, this thing's hissing at me, I'll just try to pet it. Like, he should, like, back away. I would have handled that differently.
Right.
But also, like, it all resolves within the span of, like, a minute.
Right.
So, like, he didn't really have, like, he was going to die in that situation no matter what he did, pretty
Right.
much. It doesn't actually matter what he did on some level. But, like, with this movie, there's, like, the guy with, like, the backbreaker thing comes out and kills him. And then it's like in the room with that woman, and she's like trying to survive, and she's fighting, and then the other one like locks her in, and she's like, I can't, I'm in a panic attack. It's like, why are we watching this? And then she opens the door, goes in with the shotgun when it's too late, and her friend's already been killed. And then she like slips and like shoots the gun in the air. She slips on the blood, and it's just like how, oh my gosh, it's like fumble after fumble after fumble. And like, who wants to watch somebody making so many fumbles? And I don't know enough about like the horror scene to know whether or not people like this stuff or not. But it's like super tropey horror things. And I always thought people liked that because, that's in so many of those movies. But apparently, like, horror fans are like, no, we're connoisseurs. I'm like, so now we're connoisseurs. Okay.
No, we're not. We are not. There are certain intelligent horrors.
Of course.
House on Haunted Hill would be a prime example.
Yeah, Haunting on Hill House and like the original Alien, and like people do like, I'm not saying that you can't, that if you're a horror fan, you don't appreciate good movies. I'm just saying, like, it's weird that like these horror tropes have, perpetuated for so long, and then why is this the movie that has to take so much of this heat? It's like so many other of these movies do too. It's like, and I don't see them getting, maybe those are heavily criticized, and I'm just not aware. I'm not a big horror buff myself.
It's kind of like stormtroopers having terrible aim. It's just like,
yeah,
the idiot's gonna walk into the dark and figure out what the noise was.
Set
We all know it's coming.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. With this one, yeah, that scene, I remember watching it in the theater, and I was like, I hate this woman. She is the dumbest person.
Right.
because the weird
She's so incompetent. She
and
can't keep it together in this
it's
desperate situation.
but it's like
So you're just
aggressive incompetence. It's almost
Right,
like she's
right.
trying to be this bad. It's like, come on, no one is this bad.
Right.
But there was so the scene is the guy like gets ripped open from the back, and this alien comes out, and so that part's fun, right? It's pretty visceral again.
Yeah, it's fine.
Plays
Yeah,
into
it's
the
good.
alien trope,
Mhm.
and then an actual xenomorph shows up real early in the movie. It's like, all right, cool, we're starting it off.
Yeah.
But he gets out in this room with his nurse, and the other nurse like runs out and locks the door, and she's like, "You gotta let me out." And she's like, "I can't."
And it's like, you
Like,
have
why
time.
not?
Just get out.
Because you can see clearly that this thing has not gotten up yet. It's still like fumbling
Dazed.
around.
Yeah.
So it's like, just open it real quick and let her out, and then close it again. Like, she's like, "Ah!" And then she runs off, and you're like, why did you do this? You're like actively killing your friend now. And so it does lead into this moment of this girl being locked in there, and she's having a hard time, and she's surviving a little bit. So it's kind of scary. It's horrifying. It's a rough scene.
But how?
But then she runs over, grabs the gun, and is like,
Yeah.
"I'm gonna go take care of it now." And then she runs in, and literally all she does is slip, shoot the ceiling or whatever,
Right.
get up, and run out.
Yep.
I was like, well, what did you come in here for at all? Like,
Yeah,
why did you do
help
this?
anything.
It was so stupid. And then the thing gets out.
Right.
And she shoots a couple more times, only things that are flammable apparently, and blows up, and she catches on fire and dies. And it's like, what was the point of this scene? Why did we watch this? This was like, we were all rooting for her to die by the time she finally did.
Right.
It's like, oh, thank
Right.
God she's not yelling and screaming anymore. She's peace and quiet.
Maybe Ridley Scott wanted us to see the human characters the way David sees them.
Sure. We'll read that into the film now. That's what happened.
Because it feels like it's melodrama. Like, this is so dramatic.
Yeah.
It's so much.
It
Like,
didn't fit
you
into
didn't
the
need all of
themes.
this. It would have been
Right.
fine if you just played things straight,
Right.
like you had in Prometheus. Because that's the thing. Like, you got to give Prometheus credit there. Like, when it does the horror scenes, it's horror. Well, I guess you can't, because actually there's some morons in that. I forgot about them. I was thinking of like the Shaw sequence where I'm like, oh, that scene's so good.
Right.
You know, the
when she cuts it
C-section
out,
thing. Yeah. But like in this one, does this have like an equivalent scene that's like equally horrific? Because like all the one that comes to mind is the backbreaker scene. Like that part of it is good, but then it just totally unravels into complete nonsense.
Well, there's two tropey scenes.
Okay.
I know you don't remember this because it's very easy to get, but they're in the temple thing where David is, and the one girl wanders off.
Yep.
All alone for no reason. She goes like hardcore tropey, like, oh, I'm gonna go in the dark room and
and
just
she's gonna like take a bath or whatever.
Yeah, and so
what?
I don't know what it is with Ridley. He's like, look, I want them in the most vulnerable, and that means they got to get naked. It's like you could do a different thing. Nah, naked. So she starts to like take her shirt off or whatever, and she's like cleaning her wound or something, and then she sees a reflection of something looming behind her, and then she turns around and screams, and then someone finds her head like floating later. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it's just
the thing about the movie is that it sets itself up to be, I don't know, it has these like higher themes, right? It's very philosophical, especially with the beginning scene. It's this really interesting, compelling conversation that he's having with Wayland.
It's fascinating.
And then it does these things where it's like, okay, why
such
are we
a
doing
harsh contrast,
right? And
and
don't get me wrong, like I love this movie. I think it's a lot of fun, and it's very nostalgic for me in a lot of ways. The thing that I didn't like about it was that it tried to cater too hard to an audience that I think it misunderstood.
Yeah.
Right, because instead of handing an alien movie over, he was trying to throw in tropey horror things into this film.
And like that's never been an alien thing, so why is it here now?
Yeah, why are you doing this? And it was just to cater to the audience that was complaining about Prometheus being what it was.
Right.
So, all in all, I mean, I enjoy this movie, and I enjoy what it tries to do on expounding upon ideas that came from Alien and Prometheus.
Yeah.
I just think it catered a little too hard in too many areas.
Mm-hmm.
But on all the levels, like it looks incredible. Same thing you were talking about. Like it's a beautiful film to watch. Visual effects are all incredible. Music is great in both movies, actually.
Yeah,
Is it Streitenfeld for both of them? Because I know.
No, he did the first one, and then
Okay.
someone else who does Covenant. But they're both excellent scores, and that
Yep.
doesn't get enough praise. Like
No.
they're really really
I
compelling.
found a new appreciation for the Prometheus score as I watched it that time. I was like, man,
Yeah.
he went all out for this one. Great.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, hardcore appreciation for that. I really appreciated themes that they alluded to without necessarily going into it. Like, I like the theory that she might be an android. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it's
I just
interesting.
don't, like we were saying for some of the previous conversations, is that you can't rely on a meta analysis to hold your movie up, right? You
Yeah,
have to
that's not
have
gonna work.
something strong enough in the movie to keep us hooked. I do like the questions, like so that the example would be the first movie, Alien, that alluded to a lot of deeper concepts, but also didn't expound upon them. They were just like, there's clearly a built universe in which this
Yeah.
exists that makes this more compelling on a certain level. And then Prometheus did a good job of explaining all those concepts, or at least most of them. But it
Mhm.
also brought up other concepts like, well, if this is something that created man, what created them? And if
Yeah.
these things are horrifying enough to create man and be the way that they were, what is it that created them? And could it be even worse? Like that, I thought would have been an interesting progression. I would have been interested in seeing more of that. But I was also interested to see a lot of themes that they played out in Alien Covenant with the androids, because I thought like it was a great
Yeah.
dichotomy in how they played with it
Mm-hmm.
and how they continued it. So David was a really compelling character. I have not seen Romulus myself. I was actually going to consider seeing that this weekend potentially. Don't know. It's not Scott. I think
Yeah.
that they moved away from themes of Prometheus and Covenant, so that's why I didn't include it in this video. I was like,
Yeah. I
okay.
mean, this is also like maybe a separate issue, but like I've already seen the movie Romulus, except I haven't seen it. I saw the
I see.
trailer,
Gotcha.
and the trailer spoiled the whole movie.
It shows
Like the
everyone that
whole
dies and
thing.
everything. Yeah.
There's like characters like, oh, the chest burster. I'm like, now I know they die by a chest burster. Like, why would you show that in a trailer? What's wrong with you? Like,
I would love to make a video about trailers. This would be a great
it was
thing to evaluate.
infuriating.
Like,
I
how
was
much
like,
do you give away in a trailer and how much do you don't? What are good trailers look like?
exactly. And you go to the theater and it's like, now I'm stuck. I have to watch the trailer. So I can't even avoid it.
Right.
And it just spoiled everything. It's like, there's going to be xenomorphs in this movie. Face huggers up to wazoo. Here they are. Look at them. They're infecting this guy. They're yanking this, limb out of this guy's throat. And it's just like, dude, like scale back. I get it. I know what an alien is.
Right.
Oh my God. And you compare, I bring it up because like you look at the
We found
trailers.
one of Mitch's pet peeves here.
Yeah, this one, I will be on the soapbox all day. I cannot stand that. Don't spoil your freaking movie. But you look at the other trailers for specifically for Prometheus. I remember there's this really cool trailer, and it's Guy Pearce as the Wayland.
Yeah.
As Wayland, and
Oh,
he's
yeah.
giving this like
Right.
it's like this Steve Jobs TED Talk
Right.
like speech, and he's talking about how great his company is and like what he's done. And then it's just like Wayland Corporation. And like, that's it. That's the trailer. It's a scene that's not even in the movie, but I'm like, how awesome is that? It's just
Yeah.
like advertisements for the Wayland Corporation. I'm like, that gets me interested. That's
Right.
super cool and unusual. Do more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, more of like a teaser kind of.
Yeah.
Where it's
just
like,
kinda
you know what this is, but also it's introducing elements without giving anything of the movie away.
Yeah.
Especially if it's not in the movie. I think that's a great concept. But like I said, we should do a video on trailers.
Yeah.
And just kind of do some comparisons and stuff.
Should be a law. Can't spoil your own movie.
Stop showing me people who die. That's not what I want. Why do I want to figure that out while I'm watching the movie? Go figure. I'm going to see it.
Like, isn't that at least part of the appeal in a horror movie? It's like, I don't
One
want to
would-
just see it
one would
process.
think.
I want to wonder who.
Who will it be? It was the butler the whole time. Oh, wait. No.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can cut it there. Did you have more to say about Alien Covenant at all?
I feel like I did, but oh yeah, there is one other scene I do think we got to mention. And there's one of the characters on the ship who is just a total idiot, and he's determined to be an idiot from the moment that he starts speaking. And then there's the one scene where he starts to redeem himself, where he doesn't trust David, and he's like, "I'm on to you. I've got a gun to you, David. I'm going to shoot you if you do something wrong." And then he's like, well, do you want to see like my experiments? I mean, that's basically what he says.
Oh
And then he
yeah.
pulls them into the other room, and there's all the egg sacs, and he's like, what is this? I don't know. It's like, dude,
I forgot about that.
do you need to know?
Because he follows him down into the deep, dark basement, and he's like, all right, I'm going to find out your secrets now. It's like, didn't you just say you don't trust this guy? Yeah, just shoot him. I forgot about that.
Because he does shoot the alien that kills the woman where that lops off her head.
Right.
He does shoot that thing. He just kills it, and you're like, some justice. All right.
Oh,
this guy's pulling around.
Okay, so so he comes in. He realizes that this chick is dead. He knows that something is wrong in here.
Right.
And then he sees David talking to the xenomorph.
That's right.
He's like, I found out. It's like, all right,
and
we
then he blows
got
the alien to smithereens. He just murders that thing straight up.
And David's like, no.
Yeah, he gets all upset.
And he's like, all right, I've made a connection here. David is clearly in league with this thing.
This is the bad guy.
But
I figured it out.
I'm going to hear you out. Let's go down in the basement. I want to hear what you have to say.
Oh, man.
I totally forgot about that. Like,
yeah, it's like, you should
all right, I'll listen.
I'm okay with like that on some level, the way they play it out. I'm like, okay, you want to get to the bottom of it, maybe put something in place and you can get more information, I guess. I think it's way too risky. I would not do that personally, but okay, sure.
They definitely take it too far. He's like, so you want me to stick my face in the egg?
Basically.
He's like, all right.
Yes.
What's in there? Like, why did you do that? We did not establish distrust to do this, but he's like, all right. Did you want to stick your face? No, you stick your face in there.
Yeah. It's like opening
okay.
up, and there's
you make
like
a compelling
claws
point.
and stuff. It's like, shoot the thing.
And he keeps watching. It's like coming out, and he's
just like, oh no.
What is it?
Oh, man.
Yeah. Like I said, it caters too far to a specific audience. But
do audience members like that? Like, your run-of-the-mill horror movie fan, do they like that kind of stuff?
Here's the thing.
Idiots getting killed. Maybe that's cathartic.
Yeah, just watching like, aha, you got what is coming to him. The thing about, so when you get into horror movie tropes, with a traditional horror film, not like Alien. Alien's different.
Yeah.
When you get into a traditional one, that's a perfect way to set up your big bad. You're scary, right? That's a way to introduce it. And usually it's before you know what's coming, right? When you have an established franchise, you can't get away with a disease, right? That's the thing. So when you're dealing with something like, I'm trying to think of a better example, like a Conjuring situation.
Okay.
They move into the house and stuff's going wrong, right? Something is happening in the basement.
Yeah.
And so they keep going down to check what it is. Like, what is this thing that we keep encountering? So when you get into stuff like that, you kind of understand, like, okay, you're going to have the dumber character that's going to be the one that's constantly sticking his head. He's going to stick his hand in the trap until it goes off. So you get that. And it also helps build. It's like a world building, essentially, for a horror film. Because you're familiar with most of the world. On average, you're familiar with most of the world of a horror film.
Oh.
You're not familiar with the thing that's scary.
Okay, so when it starts killing people, that's how your way to learn
that's your,
what's going on.
Open door.
Okay, because you've definitely seen a lot more horror than I have.
Sure.
So this is helpful to kind of hear more. I get kind of squeamish sometimes with horror. I'm not, if I'm not in the mood, I can't do it. I like gothic horror. I love gothic horror.
Absolutely.
But like, like the classics, like I'm talking like Frankenstein,
right?
Nosferatu, Son of Frankenstein. I like that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So,
Sequels are great for those for sure.
So the modern ones, it kind of depends.
There's a specific taste, and I have to be in a specific mood for nowadays for sure. I went through a phase where I just was like, watch them all.
Yeah.
But no, so that's your way of like introducing this thing into the world. Like I said,
Alien doesn't need that.
It's not. It doesn't fit with Alien.
Yeah.
Alien was made specifically to create tropes of its own, right? That's why you're in space. You're trapped on a spaceship with something you can't get away from.
Yeah.
That was its trope.
Yeah.
So you're going to have the quintessential idiots or people that don't know how to deal with survival on some level. And that's just going to be played into the story. The thing about what happens with Covenant and Prometheus is that they tried to play with Covenant specifically. They tried to play with those elements a little too hard in a universe that
Or
it
a
doesn't
lot.
belong in. Yeah. Right.
Okay, so here's a final question I think we should answer,
Okay.
and that's how is it that despite because we've clearly acknowledged the flaws in this movie in
These are
particular, both
movies
of
we
them,
like and we're
but
willing
these are
to
movies we
acknowledge.
like.
Yeah.
So how is it that we still like these movies despite all of these flaws? Is it just because the other elements are good enough to outweigh it, or like what would be your answer to that? Like, why do you still like Covenant despite all this cheesy crap that
I feel
we're
like I'm in
pointing
an
out?
interview. Well, Covenant, like I said, it has some nostalgic value. I saw it in theaters and it was fun. I was like, man, it was an incredible looking movie, and I really liked the themes it was exploring. I thought this was a really good natural progression, not only from Alien but also from themes
Okay.
that I thought were compelling in Prometheus and Alien. I was like, all right, I get to get a lot more of this. So I
Okay.
liked that, and I
A
thought there
friend of
were
mine says the same thing about this movie. Is he likes that extension of the themes in Prometheus and
right.
how it's faithful to that and
Yeah,
Alien.
and
Yeah.
it's something that I think will be a common talking point of the HolmFront is that we really appreciate natural progression and what that looks like in a
Yeah.
true form, right? In an artistic
Mhm.
version. And I thought they did a really great job of expounding those themes that made Prometheus a strong film. And like I said, the problem that they had was that it was not contradictory. It just tried to cater too much to an audience that didn't exist within that film.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think expounding on the androids, expounding on the philosophical aspects of those movies, and kind of leaning into the Greek god aspect of all of it,
Hmm.
I thought were great. Were really good for me to be able to ignore, because it's only a couple moments. Like we expound on them, like they're really funny and they're really dramatic. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
there's so few of them, and they don't drag you out of the movie kicking and screaming and then throw you back in at the end.
Yeah, that's true.
So, because there are some movies that do, like Marvel is a perfect example of that. Whenever it
Movie
jumps,
stop. Tell
exactly,
joke. Movie resume.
exactly, it's so jarring that it's like, and it just stands out. Whereas
Yeah.
this one, it doesn't do that quite as roughly. Like it's definitely like, all right, but you
This
don't
is a
like,
tropey sequence, but I've
right.
shot it in a way that looks nice.
And it's also still within the alien, and it's it's xenomorph killing someone. Like who doesn't enjoy that? If you're
A
in an
classic.
alien movie, you're gonna like an alien killing
Yeah.
someone, even though
Right.
the way is tropey. The alien getting the guy is like, all right, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
So
That's fair. It
did
does
that
feel like
answer the question
I
appropriately?
think it
Okay.
does. Yeah, and I think yeah, it's just it's such an interesting point about what things like what at what point does a movie do something that's unforgivable and
Right.
it loses you versus like, yeah, I can look past that and keep going because I
Right.
think it seems like our stance is with in terms of audience and critic reaction to these movies, they took the flaws and just said it's enough to just bring it down a peg. It's not worth watching. Not a good movie. And we're like, still a good movie.
Right.
Yeah, there's some flaws here, but it didn't like lose us. And that's just I don't know. It's just interesting that we are still fans of them, even though.
Oh yeah, I love these two a
Mhm.
lot. And
Yeah, like the
I've
highs are highs with it, I guess. Like
oh yeah,
I like the things that it proposes that are interesting. I really enjoy.
and it doesn't dip too
And
low to cancel out those highs. I think is the
yeah,
biggest thing.
yeah.
So that
I
would
agree with
probably be
that.
my answer there.
Yeah, I think they are like frustrating elements, especially in Covenant, and it makes me just think that it could have been a better movie. That's a
Sure.
thought I think quite a bit when I'm watching Covenant. It's like, ah, like this sequence could be better.
Right.
Be just done this way, and it would have been fine. But it's like I don't know. I mean that's why I like Prometheus like a little bit more. But like, yeah, on the whole, I don't know that I definitely don't hate them though, and I do feel like the movies get a lot of hate, and I don't feel like that's where it gets warranted because I'm like, well, there's still merits here. I mean, it's not the Joss Whedon one, which I'm remembering now. He wrote it, I think, is the thing. Yeah, and
There's your problem.
It's rough.
Yeah,
It's real rough.
I did not even realize that was a thing. I
we should watch, or you should watch it. I don't know if I can. Stomach
I
it
think
again.
I would like to make a couple more of these on Alien because I think the first
It's a
film is
fascinating series.
probably worth its own, but
Yeah.
I'd like to watch the first three because I think those should be included. I don't think that anybody acknowledges the fourth one in a way that would require
shouldn't,
it being
rightfully
included
so.
in any of these videos.
Bad movie.
So every time I talk to an Alien fan, they're like, "There's no episode 4." I'm like, "Man, all right."
Resurrection, okay?
Yeah. And I will say, in the theme, again, I don't want to jump too far into because I think the first three deserve their own attention. 'Cause
Yeah.
these two are very specifically within the same realm.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think that they are a natural progression of the first three. But here's the thing about the first three is that they also, the third one, I was not a fan. But the first three do have like this kind of weird arc progression difference among them.
Yeah.
Arguably, on a purely objective level, one and two are the strongest, right? One
Yeah.
is a great film, great setup. Two is a great movie in the way that it's just an action flick. It's an 80s action sci-fi horror.
Yeah.
And it does a great job with all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then three is just like this weird psychological thriller thing.
Yeah.
And it adds a lot of
Yeah, it's really
elements that
weird.
also don't belong in an Alien franchise. So that's why I think it's the weakest of the three for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But again, I think they deserve their own video, and I think I'd like to do that at some point for sure.
I'm down.
But I wanted to keep these two films together because I love them both. They're films from my era because the first three are before my time.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with them necessarily. My parents definitely wouldn't let me watch those movies.
What would be your score, your percentage score for these two then?
Prometheus would probably have somewhere probably around like a 85 roughly.
85. Okay.
And then
I think that's fair.
I'd probably jump down to maybe like an 80 for Covenant just because of what he does with some of those tropey things.
Gotcha.
I think on a subjective level, I probably enjoy Covenant more. I think it's
Right.
a more fun film to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Although objectively, I would say Prometheus is a better movie altogether.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I think I would more or less agree with that.
You put it around the same scores roughly.
Well, I mean, I guess like if it's subjectively, that's how I felt about them, the
Yeah.
80 and 85.
Okay.
But if I'm trying to like recommend it, like if I was a critic, I would probably want to include something about how I think other people might enjoy it.
Sure.
And so for that, it probably would take some hits because I just don't know that they quite have.
Well, especially within Alien expectations. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think like, you know, I know I kind of I feel like I'm bashing Alien fans for being for not wanting this philosophical depth that these movies provide.
Maybe.
But at the same time, like I don't think they're wrong to just want their good-hearted alien fun.
Yeah, that's
so like it's an Alien sequel that comes with some expectations that need to be satisfied, and I don't know that either film satisfies them as well as the original. So I probably would do like a, I don't know, the 75 range for the two of them. Like I don't know if I would do a different score for the both of them. I mean, that's hard to say because like I get what you're saying about the tropey stuff, but I also just feel like it's so indicative of horror movies that I just don't know how to like factor that against it. It doesn't appeal to me,
right.
But like,
well, that's the thing.
yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
think
know.
it appeals generally to alien audiences either. I think that was what the problem was.
Apparently, and that seems to be true. So, yeah.
Either way. Well, thank you for joining us. This has been another episode of Rotten Disparities here on the Home.